ladies and gentlemen, to break down the panel discussion, we're going to have an interaction just up on stage. Should you want to comment, participate, please keep your questions. We'll be also opening up the floor so that you can also dive in and give your input. Allow me to straight away begin from Mr. Bagumuhunda to just get a kind of a dipstick, and to really kind of test where are we at when you're talking about matters monetary union, because as a catalyst in enhancement of integration.
Thank you very much, moderator. Good afternoon, everybody. As you may be aware, the East African community set itself some specific milestones, starting with the customs union, then followed by a common market, then subsequently a monetary union, and ultimately a political federation. The customs union commenced in 2005 after some intense preparation for it, and then the common market came into force in 2010, and the monetary union preparation then started immediately thereafter. The monetary union preparations culminated into a protocol that was signed in 2013. And the monetary union set itself to commence within a period of 10 years, which means the full implementation would start in 2024. Now, what has been accomplished, or what is being done right now, is the preparation to ensure that we have the necessary legal and policy instruments in place for the implementation of the monetary union. The first thing that is being done right now is to put in place the necessary laws. I think we have 4 pieces of legislations that are being worked on. 2 have already reached the East African Legislative Assembly. I think they are going for the 2nd and 3rd reading so that the enactment thereafter are sent. The first important critical bill is the one establishing the Monetary Institute. And the second one that is being in the Parliament is the one establishing the Statistics Bureau. The Monetary Institute will be the transitional institutional framework to an East African central bank. And it is expected that it will put in place all the necessary mechanisms to ensure that come 2023, we are ready, set, and the monetary union, the central bank, and ultimately the single currency can be implemented under the East African community. So, in a nutshell, that's where we are as far as the monetary union is concerned.
Thank you very much. 5 years on, of course, still keeping up to date with, the progress continues. From your target is about 2023. Of course, as part of an agenda as a wider African nations. Mr. Carrera, I think from moving in from the Eabc, from where you sit at the business level, so do you feel that there is effort and there is kind of a common purpose or common vision into realizing this vision we have?
Thank you. I think there is, I would call it generic vision from how I see things. There's a generic vision. Certainly all the member states are not on the same page. I think Bagamoda will agree with me. Managing the political will has always been a challenge, not only with the common market, but a number of other small things here and there. So that is the starting point, as far as I look at things. We need to have everybody on the same page. People need to understand what it will entail to have a common position to implement all provisions of the common market protocol until we get now to the monetary union. Monetary union, I mean, as it says, will be regulated by, there has to be an East African central bank. There has been an East African Development Bank, which has tried to put countries together. But the membership, I think, has not been that efficient. Its performance really is not very, very vibrant across the region. So we need to understand all these dynamics, that a East African Central Bank has to be in place. Now, monetary union means go to the same currency, it should have the same power. Now, when you look at the situation currently, we have different currencies that weigh different vis-a-vis the US dollar, which is the dominant factor usually that creates the base. Now, the other thing to look at is the debt situation. What is the debt situation with each of the member states vis-a-vis the intended monetary union? You remember what happened to Greece in the making of the euro. Some of the countries in the region here are badly indebted out there, and they owe so much money. Now, how is this going to work in the framework of the monetary union to be achieved in 2023? So there has to be a relook at so much debt. Will debt be written off? Experts like Abagamonda will have to be consulted. There has to be legislation. There has to be all the legal components that go with changing monies. The debt, I know for a fact that Burundi's debt with the world out there, Uganda's debt, Rwanda's debt are all different. So how are these going to be paid in view of the intended monetary union? So all these are aspects to be looked at. 2023 might be a bit of an ambitious time, looking at the speed at which we have taken to implement the simpler things. Implementing simpler obstacles has taken a lot of time. To date, some of the simplest barriers are still in place. So I don't know how fast it shall be in 2023. Possibly, if there's goodwill, if there's determination, if people get together, if the necessary legislation goes through IALA, which I'm sure will happen, but beyond assenting to these laws and implementation in the field, there's also transition measures. All these are aspects to be understood now. We as private sector need to follow these things very closely and know every stage of it. Because at the end of the day, it is generally private sector that brings in the most dollars. It is private sector that spends the most dollars. So once we turn to the East African, whatever name we shall call it, we shall be heavily involved. So these are things we need to follow very, very closely.
Thank you. Key statement is standard from what you just said is just the issue about time and policy. Wanamosha, I know these are two key elements that are not quite, investors are not quite happy about. When they come in, the speed of implementation, the speed of action, especially among member states, and even just a predictable policy environment. I don't know what you to just say about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think as Dennis says, what we are looking at here is a situation where, on the one hand, we have to congratulate the countries that they really wanted to move very fast on integration. And that's why they tried to compress all these key transformational integration elements within such a short period of time. If you look at where they started with the free trade area and immediately moved to customs union and on moved to common market and then to monetary union, these were compressed within just about 10 years. Now, these are transformational integration entities which take anything up to 20 or 30 years. But I say we congratulate our countries because they wanted to do these things very fast and quickly. Now, this is also part of the problem. Because when they moved through these stages without implementing and completing one stage completely, when you move to the next stage, it became more complicated. Because if you had fully implemented the single custom territory, and then you moved to the common market protocols, they were going to be much, much easier to implement. And then after that, because that becomes the stage before the monetary union, then you move to the monetary union, which again becomes much easier to implement. But the key is we are where we are now. So what should happen? it seems to me that the countries must adhere to the commitments they made in implementing all the protocols of all the 3 stages. We have to do that. We have to immediately really conclude the single custom territory, and quickly, so that it paves the way for the implementation of these key common market protocols, like common taxation, you know. Unless you have these kind of things, you cannot have the monetary union. And some of the things we stipulated in the common market protocols are things that are supposed to pave the way for the monetary union. So my view is we should then find a mechanism through which we can really move to implement those things and very quickly. And let me also add that when you look at what the countries are trying to do, you see, we have come to deal more with the concepts, the fundamentals, the range of other theoretical problems, but we have to create, you know, integration as a culture. It has a culture. We have to create a situation where every country has to realize that, A, it has not made it. If each of us had made it, it wouldn't even be here. 2, it cannot make it on its own. So that is going to have to be the role Eabc is also going to play, to be able to convey the message forcefully that really no country has made it, and secondly, no country is able to make it on its own. I wasn't in Kigali, but Dennis was mentioning about some of these countries which were not there or which did not come, thinking that they have made it. And you know, we wouldn't like to say much about that, but let me conclude by telling you a story of a young boy in Dar es Salaam who used to go to the beach and sit with a taxi driver there. So this taxi driver one day told him, "Why are you always coming here?" Then he said, "Where should I be?" He said, "You should go to school." Then this fellow says, and then the taxi driver told him, "You know, if you go to school, you'll then be able to qualify, you'll get a good job." And then this fellow says, and then the taxi driver told him, "Then you'll marry, you'll have children, and then you will come to the beach in your own right afterwards." And this fellow was very angry. He said, "I'm already in the beach. I'm already here. You want me to go through all these things only to come back to the beach?" You know, what we should tell some of these countries, they are not at the beach. They are kidding themselves. We need all of us together to be able to make it. But we also need an East African culture, an East African culture that adheres to the interests of East Africa, not to the interest of certain sections of businesses. And I think this is going to have to be important, because then we are going to be able to push these things together. But let me finally say that ultimately the foundation for all these things is political will. Always, whatever we do at Eabc, whatever we do anywhere else, the government is always the lion at the door. You can't come out, you can't go in, unless they say yes or they say no. So our challenge is really, the governments are ready. Our challenge is to provide evidence-based conclusions. Evidence-based conclusions are critical, because at the end of the day, we can only persuade the governments. We can't dictate to them what to do, and we shouldn't. But one thing I've come to discover in my long working experience in various places, and this is with due respect to people in government, the people in government really don't have time to think. They don't have that time. He rushes to the office in the morning, he's pushed to a meeting, he goes to a meeting, he sits in the meeting until at the end of the day, he comes and picks up his bag and goes home. These are very well-trained people with huge intellect, but we in the private sector must do a lot of thinking. we in independent institutions should come up with evidence-based conclusions. For example, nobody has really told Tanzania or Rwanda or Kenya or whoever that if you completely and willingly adhere to the conclusion of the single custom territory, these are the key benefits to your country. We can tell them how much money they are losing. Analytically, this is possible. We can tell them how much money they are losing. So my conclusion would be Eabc and we who are now in the advocacy must move toward evidence-based conclusions of what we want these governments to implement and go to them and suggest them to them that these are the benefits if you have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosha. I'm coming to you, Consolata. I have, I think, two-pronged question, but more particularly is on the sense of the participation, especially by women. I really don't want it to be kind of a high-level discussion, but also look towards what is the role, especially of the small-scale enterprises. We're talking about monitoring, and we dig deeper to monitoring, talking about cash, and that ability to transact and to exchange. Just this afternoon, I was just buying a bag of cashew nuts just from an exhibitor outside here, and she's from Tanzania, but she's not connected to M-Pesa. So, but she could only, say that you give me an equivalent of this in Tanzanian currency, on dollars and stuff. But it just became a difficult transaction to do, and this is just a bag of cashew nuts. Now, what of large ticket transactions? So, kind of pain points of the SME sector that build up and even inhibit our integration.
Yes. Thank you very much, moderator. I think the common market is really the second regional integration milestone of the EAC, which has been, as he said, started in 2010, and we have seen really success on that. We have seen free movement of goods, that's what you are talking about, free movement of person, labor, and establishment or residents. It's really effective. But this morning we was talking about NTBs, who is really created by either the private sector or the government. It's still there. We still have a lot of challenges, but there is also very good result. And we heard yesterday very nice testimony from women talking about how they are trading between them, between the countries. But still a lot of challenges and barriers. Sometimes you feel that they are alone, they are just trying to survive and take advantage on all the policies, etc., but still have a lot of challenges. So we have to look at that and see how we can get good solution on that before we go to the really monetary union. Yeah.
So sort out the small issues before we get into the next, and Secretary also mentioned on the same.
Yeah.
So I want to jump into that because I know the Cabinet Secretary in charge of trade mentioned it. The Prime Minister mentioned it. It kind of became kind of a highlight into our morning discussion. And this is for you, Mr. Bagabunda. It's in the sense of who are really causing NTBs, because these NTBs, again, are barriers to trade and barriers to relations together. From where you sit, do you feel that on one end we might be here and saying, hey, you guys act a bit faster, but at the same time we'll meet you up in your cubicles and tell you to slow down a bit?
Yeah, the NTB issue has been widely talked about from different dimensions. Yeah, they are, and they come in different forms in this region. They come in different forms because of some of the structural variations that we have, and including the legal frameworks that we have in the region. Some of them are embedded in form of regulatory frameworks that are scattered across different agencies, for example. And these come up because each institution or agency wants to enforce and ensure compliance. And in the process, you find you have NTPs of that of that emanating from there. Some are completely administrative that are caused through administrative mechanisms. Some deliberate, some through ignorance, and some through